Nebraska Territory, 1868. The setting sun painted the vast prairie in shades of amber and gold, but Katherine Blakely scarcely noticed as she stood at the edge of her family's failing homestead. At 22, she had watched the harsh frontier claim everything she loved. First her mother to fever, then her father to a broken heart that gave out just 3 months past. The small cabin and struggling farm that remained were a far cry from the dream that had drawn her family west from Pennsylvania 4 years earlier. "Even the land refuses to love us," she whispered to the wind, her slender fingers brushing a loose strand of chestnut hair from her face. Her blue calico dress, once her Sunday best, now served as everyday wear, patched at the elbows and faded from too many washings. Katherine surveyed the withering crops with resignation. The truth had settled in her heart like the dust that coated everything in this merciless territory. She was alone, and likely to remain so. What man would want a woman with nothing but debt and dying dreams to her name? In the frontier, survival meant strength, and she was running out of both. "The land doesn't love or hate, Miss Blakely. It simply is." The voice behind her belonged to Preston Mackenzie, the young rancher whose cattle operation adjoined her struggling homestead. At 25, he had already established himself as one of the most promising cattlemen in the region, his success standing in stark contrast to her failure. Katherine didn't turn. "I wasn't aware I had an audience, Mr. Mackenzie. I didn't mean to intrude." His boots crunched on the dry earth as he approached. "I was riding fence and saw you standing here. Thought I'd check if everything was all right." Now she faced him, taking in his tall frame. The clean white shirt rolled at the sleeves revealing tanned, muscular forearms. His sandy hair caught the dying light, and his face, though weathered by sun and wind, retained a youthful handsomeness that made her suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. "Everything is fine," she lied, lifting her chin. "Or as fine as can be expected." Preston's green eyes studied her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. He had a way of looking at a person that suggested he saw more than they wanted to reveal. "I heard in town that the bank's been pressing," he said gently. Katherine stiffened. "My affairs are my own concern, Mr. Mackenzie." "Of course." He nodded, respectful. "Just know that neighbors help neighbors out here. That's the only way any of us survive." She nearly laughed. "Is that why you've come? To offer charity to the pitiful spinster before she's forced to sell?" His expression hardened slightly. "That's not fair, Katherine. Not everyone sees you that way, isn't it?" She gestured toward her struggling crops. "I've tried everything my father taught me, but the land won't yield. The bank gives me 3 months before they foreclose." She turned away, blinking back tears. "You should go. I have chores before dark." Preston hesitated. "My offer to help still stands. No strings attached." As he mounted his horse and rode away, Katherine watched his retreating figure against the darkening sky. Men like Preston Mackenzie didn't need the burden of failing farms or failing women. Out here, a man needed a partner who could contribute, not someone who couldn't even save her family legacy. That was the cold truth of frontier life, and she had accepted it long ago. What Katherine didn't know was that as Preston rode home, he was thinking not of her failing farm, but of the stubborn courage in her blue eyes that reminded him of something he'd been missing since coming west, a reason to build more than just a cattle empire. 2 weeks later, the late June heat shimmered over the prairie like a malevolent spirit, shriveling what little remained of Katherine's hope along with her crops. She had just placed the last bucket of water on her pathetic vegetable garden when she heard the commotion, men's voices, horse hooves, and the unmistakable sound of cattle. Shading her eyes, she watched in disbelief as a small herd of about 30 cattle moved across her northern field, guided by 3 riders. At their head was Preston Mackenzie, his face set in concentration as he directed the others. Katherine rushed forward, her skirts gathered in her hands, confusion and anger warring inside her. "Mr. Mackenzie, what is the meaning of this?" Preston reined his horse to a stop and dismounted in one fluid motion. "Miss Blakely," he greeted, removing his hat. "I've brought you some cattle." "I can see that," she said, breathless with exertion and shock. "What I don't understand is why." "Because you need them." His directness caught her off guard. "Your land's better suited for grazing than crops. Always has been." Katherine felt heat rising to her cheeks. "I never asked for your cattle, Mr. Mackenzie. I don't accept charity, and I certainly don't need a man to tell me how to work my own land." The two ranch hands exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. Preston noticed and nodded to them. Get the herd settled in the north pasture. I'll catch up. Once they were gone, he turned back to Katherine. It's not charity. It's an investment. Investment. She crossed her arms. Explain yourself. I need more grazing land. You need a way to make this place profitable before the bank takes it. His green eyes were earnest, lacking the pity she feared. I'm proposing a partnership. My cattle, your land. We split the profits. Katherine studied him suspiciously. And what do you get from this arrangement that you couldn't get by simply waiting for me to fail and buying my land outright? A flash of hurt crossed his face. Is that what you think of me? It's what experience has taught me to think of people. Everyone wants something, Mr. Mackenzie. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. What if what I want is to see you succeed, Katherine? Did that possibility ever cross your mind? The sincerity in his voice momentarily disarmed her. No one had believed in her success, not the bankers, not the neighbors, not even herself lately. Why would you want that? Because this territory needs people who don't give up, even when it would be easier to do so. His gaze was steady. Like you. Katherine felt something shift inside her, a tiny crack in the wall of isolation she'd built. She wasn't ready to trust his motives fully, but survival demanded pragmatism. I'll consider your offer, she said finally. But I want terms written down. A proper business agreement. Preston's smile transformed his face. I wouldn't have it any other way. Partners should start with trust and clear expectations. As he rode off to join his men, Katherine watched the cattle, her cattle now, in some sense, grazing peacefully in the field that had refused to yield crops. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, something that extended beyond a simple business arrangement. What she didn't yet understand was that Preston Mackenzie had his own demons to fight, a belief that a man's worth was measured solely in the empire he built, not the connections he formed. The partnership he proposed was as much about saving himself as it was about saving her farm. By early August, the partnership had taken root like a stubborn prairie flower amid the harsh landscape. Katherine found herself looking forward to Preston's visits, which had become regular as they worked to improve fencing, build a small corral, and plan for the cattle's care. On a particularly golden evening, they sat on her porch, drinking coffee after a long day's work. Katherine had noticed a change in herself, her posture straighter, her voice stronger, her dreams tentatively reawakening. The cattle are looking good, Preston observed, his hat resting on his knee. That young heifer I was worried about has rallied. Katherine nodded, secretly pleased. She'd spent extra time with that particular animal, nursing it through a bout of illness. The land seems to be coming alive again. It was never dead, Preston said softly, just waiting for the right purpose. She studied his profile, wondering how she had initially mistaken his quiet confidence for arrogance. Why didn't you tell me you fought in the war? The question clearly surprised him. Who told you that? Your ranch hand, Jacob. He mentioned it when he was helping me repair the fence yesterday. She hesitated. He said you were at Gettysburg. Preston's jaw tightened. Jacob talks too much. Is it a secret? No, just not something I discuss. He stared into his coffee cup. It was another life. Katherine sensed the walls going up between them. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pride. It's not that. He sighed. The war taught me that life is fragile and short. That's why I came west afterward, to build something lasting. His expression grew distant. My father always said a man's only worth what he creates with his own hands. I believed him. And now, she asked softly. Preston's eyes met hers. Now I'm not so sure that's all there is. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Katherine felt herself drawn to him not just for his kindness or his undeniable handsomeness, but for the thoughtfulness that seemed to guide his actions. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if there might be more between them than a business arrangement. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. 3 riders appeared, their silhouettes dark against the setting sun. Katherine didn't recognize them, but Preston's sudden tension told her these weren't friendly visitors. He stood, positioning himself slightly in front of her. Stay on the porch, he murmured. The lead rider, a hard-faced man with a week's worth of beard, reined to a stop. Well now, if it ain't Preston Mackenzie. Expanding your operation onto pretty new territory, I see. Dirk, Preston acknowledged coolly. This is Miss Blakely's land. We have a business arrangement. The man named Dirk laughed, an ugly sound. Business, is it? That what they're calling it these days? Katherine stepped forward, ignoring Preston's warning glance. State your business, or move along, sir. You're trespassing. Dirk's eyes raked over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Feisty one, ain't she? No wonder you've been spending so much time out this way. I won't ask again. Preston's voice was deadly quiet. What do you want? Just delivering a message from Mr. Hollister. Dirk's smile disappeared. He's not happy about you refusing to sell your water rights. Says it's making things difficult for everyone. Hollister doesn't own the territory, no matter what he thinks. Preston's stance remained casual, but Katherine noticed his hand had drifted closer to his sidearm. My water, my decision. And now you've got this pretty little piece of land, too. Dirk's gaze shifted to Katherine. Shame if anything were to happen to it. Frontier's dangerous for a woman alone. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Katherine felt ice in her veins, but she refused to show fear. She's not alone, Preston said, his voice steel. And neither the lady nor her land are any concern of Hollister's. Deliver that message. After a tense moment, Dirk spat on the ground. Have it your way, Mackenzie. But Hollister gets what Hollister wants. Always has. He turned his horse. Ma'am, he added with mock politeness before the three riders galloped away. When they were gone, Katherine released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Who was Hollister? Preston's expression was grim. Land speculator from back east. He's been buying up properties all over the territory, especially ones with water access. He's trying to control the whole region. And he wants your ranch. The creek that runs through my property feeds half the grazing land in the county. If he controls it, he controls everyone who needs water for their herds. Preston turned to her, his face troubled. Katherine, I'm sorry. I never meant to bring this trouble to your door. It's not your fault, she said, though fear twisted in her stomach. But what do we do now? I'm going to make sure you're protected. His hand briefly touched hers, the contact sending warmth through her despite the circumstances. I won't let them threaten you because of me. As darkness fell over the prairie, Katherine knew something fundamental had changed. The partnership that had begun as a business arrangement now felt like something more, a bond forged by shared purpose and now shared danger. What neither of them recognized yet was that the threat had awakened protective instincts in both of them, not just for the land or the cattle, but for each other. As Preston rode back to his ranch that night, his mind was filled not with Hollister's threats, but with the courage in Katherine's eyes when she had stood her ground, and the realization that he would do whatever it took to keep her safe. September brought cooler air and golden light to the prairie. It also brought increasing tension as reports reached them of other ranchers being pressured by Hollister's men. Fences mysteriously cut, cattle scattered, and in one case, a barn burning down. Katherine had begun keeping a shotgun by the door, and Preston had arranged for one of his hands to sleep in her barn, despite her initial protests. Their partnership had deepened through the shared adversity, evening conversations stretching longer as they discovered common ground in books they'd read, places they'd been, and dreams they still harbored. On a crisp afternoon, Preston arrived unexpectedly, a serious expression on his face. I need to show you something, he said without preamble. Can you ride with me? Katherine hesitated only briefly before nodding. Let me change into my riding skirt. An hour later, they crested a ridge that offered a sweeping view of the surrounding territory. Below them, Preston's ranch spread out, the neat buildings, corrals, and grazing cattle a testament to his 4 years of hard work. It's beautiful, Katherine said sincerely. You've built something remarkable here. Preston gazed out over his land, but his expression was troubled rather than proud. When I came here after the war, I was running from ghosts. I thought if I built something big enough, it might drown out the memories. He turned to her. Do you know what I've learned, Katherine? She shook her head, struck by the intensity in his eyes. Empire building is empty without someone to share it with. His voice was quiet but firm. I've been thinking about Hollister and his threats. Have there been more? She asked, concerned. Not directly, but I've made a decision. Preston took a deep breath. I'm going to sell my water rights to him. Katherine stared at him in shock. What? But you said those rights are what make your ranch valuable. They're your future. No, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. They're just water. My future is whatever I choose to build, and who I choose to build it with. The implication of his words hung between them. Katherine felt her heart beating wildly in her chest. Preston, you can't give up everything you've worked for. I'm not giving up. His hand found hers. I'm choosing something more important. If I sell the water rights, Hollister will leave us both alone. We can develop our partnership without threats hanging over us. Our partnership, she repeated, uncertain what he meant. Katherine. He moved closer, his voice dropping. These past months, working alongside you, seeing your strength and determination, I've come to care for you as more than a business partner, more than a friend. The confession she had secretly hoped for, yet feared to believe possible, now lay between them. Katherine felt tears pricking at her eyes. You don't need to sacrifice your dream for me. That's just it, he said, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. You've become part of that dream. The most important part. The moment stretched, fragile and precious. Then Katherine stepped back, old fears resurfacing. How can I believe that? Men have always valued land and fortune above all else. My own father dragged us west for it, and it killed him in the end. How are you different? Pain flashed in Preston's eyes. Because I've seen what matters. In the war, I watched men die for causes they believed in, for brothers in arms they loved. Out here, I've seen what loneliness does to a soul. His voice grew passionate. I don't want an empire, Katherine. I want a home. And I'm starting to believe that might be with you. Katherine wanted desperately to believe him, but years of disappointment had taught her caution. I need time, Preston. This is unexpected. He nodded, respecting her boundary though she could see it cost him. Take all the time you need. But know that my mind is made up about Hollister. Some things are worth more than pride or property. As they rode back in the golden afternoon light, Katherine's mind whirled with possibilities she had long since dismissed. Could Preston truly care for her beyond their business arrangement? And if he did, could she trust it to last when the harsh realities of frontier life inevitably tested them? What she didn't yet realize was that the greatest test was already approaching, one that would force both of them to confront their deepest fears and reveal truths they had kept hidden even from themselves. The autumn cattle auction in nearby Fort Kearny was the territory's largest gathering of the year. Ranchers came from miles around to sell stock, negotiate deals for the coming year, and settle old business. For Katherine and Preston, it represented the first fruits of their partnership. 10 head of cattle ready for market, the profits from which would help Katherine keep her land. The town bustled with activity as they arrived together, drawing curious glances. In the weeks since Preston's confession on the ridge, they had maintained a careful distance, though the awareness between them had only grown stronger. Katherine had found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, noting the gentleness with which he handled animals, the respect he showed his workers, the quiet competence that marked everything he did. I'll get our cattle registered for the auction, Preston said as they tied their horses at the hitching post. Would you like to look around? Katherine nodded, secretly relieved for a moment alone to gather her thoughts. I'll meet you back here in an hour. As she wandered through the busy streets, Katherine caught snippets of conversation, talk of weather, cattle prices, and increasingly, worries about Hollister's growing influence. Outside the general store, she paused to examine a display of fabrics, allowing herself a moment to dream of a new dress, something pretty, perhaps, instead of merely practical. Miss Blakely, a refined voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see an elegantly dressed woman in her 40s, her bearing unmistakably Eastern. Yes, Katherine replied, uncertain. I thought it must be you. I'm Elizabeth Hollister. The woman's smile seemed genuine, though the name sent a chill through Katherine. My husband has mentioned your property. I understand it adjoins Preston Mackenzie's ranch. Katherine straightened. It does. Mr. Mackenzie and I have a business arrangement. So I've heard. Elizabeth's gaze was assessing but not unkind. You must be quite remarkable. Preston doesn't typically form partnerships. I'm not sure what you mean, Katherine said carefully. Only that he's kept to himself since arriving in the territory. Elizabeth adjusted her gloves. Of course, that's understandable given his history. Katherine's curiosity got the better of her. His history? Oh my, you don't know? Elizabeth's surprise seemed authentic. About his family back in Virginia? The scandal? Before Katherine could respond, Preston appeared at her side, his expression darkening when he saw who she was speaking with. Mrs. Hollister, he said stiffly. I see you've met Miss Blakely. Indeed. We were having a lovely chat. Elizabeth's smile remained pleasant. My husband is looking forward to discussing your water rights, Preston. He's at the hotel whenever you're ready. After she departed, Katherine turned to Preston. What was she talking about? What scandal? His jaw tightened. Nothing that matters now. It clearly matters to you, Katherine insisted. And if we're partners, I deserve to know what I might be facing. Preston glanced around at the crowded street. Not here. Tonight, after the auction. The cattle sale proceeded successfully, their stock fetching good prices that brought a genuine smile to Katherine's face for the first time in months. But underneath her satisfaction lurked questions about Preston's past and what secrets he might be keeping. As darkness fell, they shared a quiet meal at the hotel restaurant. The business of the day concluded. When they were alone on the hotel porch, stars emerging in the vast prairie sky, Preston finally spoke. My family owned one of the largest tobacco plantations in Virginia before the war, he began, his voice low. The Mackenzie name meant something then: wealth, influence, respectability. Katherine listened silently, sensing the weight of his words. When the war came, I enlisted in the Union Army. His eyes met hers, gauging her reaction. My father disowned me on the spot. Said no son of his would fight against Virginia. You fought against your own state? Katherine asked, surprised. Preston nodded grimly. I couldn't support a cause built on human bondage, no matter what it cost me. And it cost me everything. Family, inheritance, identity. He looked out at the darkness. After Gettysburg, word reached me that my father had died. My older brother inherited everything and made it clear I was never to return. So you came west, Katherine said softly, understanding dawning. With nothing but my name and the skills I'd learned. I was determined to build something that was mine alone, something that would prove I didn't need the Mackenzie fortune. His laugh held no humor. Pride, I suppose. The very thing my father accused me of. Katherine reached for his hand. It wasn't pride, Preston. It was principle. You stood for what you believed was right, even when it cost you everything. His fingers tightened around hers. The scandal Mrs. Hollister referred to wasn't just my choosing the Union. It was that afterward, I testified against several Virginia planters who were profiteering during the war, including my brother's father-in-law. They all went to prison. His expression hardened. Some people back east still consider me a traitor twice over. Is that why you've kept to yourself out here? Why you focus so much on building your ranch? Katherine asked. Partly. Preston turned to face her fully. But also because I thought that was all that mattered, proving I could succeed on my own terms. Until I met you. Katherine felt her heart quicken. Me? You reminded me there are things worth more than success or reputation. The way you fought for your land, not for pride, but because it was your home, your father's dream. He reached up to gently touch her face. Katherine, watching you made me remember what I was fighting for in the first place. Not just freedom for others, but the chance to build a life with meaning. The tenderness in his voice undid her last defenses. I've been afraid to trust this, to trust you, she admitted. After losing my parents, watching our dreams crumble, I convinced myself that caring too much only leads to more pain. I know, he said simply. I've been afraid too. Afraid that if I let myself care about something more than my ranch, I might lose it all again. In that moment of shared vulnerability, something shifted between them. Katherine saw in Preston not just the successful rancher, but a man who had sacrificed everything for his principles, who understood loss and rebuilding as deeply as she did. Preston, she whispered, leaning toward him. Their first kiss was gentle, questioning, then deepening with a certainty that took her breath away. When they parted, Katherine felt as though something fundamental had changed, not just between them, but within herself. The wall she had built around her heart had begun to crumble. What neither of them saw was the figure watching from the shadows across the street. Dirk, Hollister's man, his expression calculating as he observed their embrace before slipping away into the night. 2 days after returning from the auction, Katherine was hanging laundry when she heard a wagon approaching. Expecting Preston, she was surprised to see a man she didn't recognize, well-dressed and city-polished despite the dust of travel. Miss Blakely, he called, reining his team to a stop. Forgive the intrusion. My name is Richard Hollister. Katherine felt her body tense. Mr. Hollister, what brings you to my property? He smiled disarmingly as he climbed down. I wanted to meet the woman who's captured Preston Mackenzie's attention. My wife was quite impressed with you at the auction. Mr. Mackenzie and I are business partners, Katherine said carefully. Of course. His smile didn't reach his eyes. A mutually beneficial arrangement, I'm sure. May I speak with you a moment? I have a proposition that might interest you. Against her better judgment, Katherine led him to the porch. She didn't invite him inside. You have a lovely piece of land here, Hollister observed, surveying her property. Though I understand you've had difficulty making it profitable until recently. We've had challenges, she acknowledged. But things are improving. Indeed. Thanks to Preston's cattle. Hollister fixed her with a calculating gaze. I wonder, though, if you fully understand the man you've partnered with. Katherine stiffened. I believe I do. Do you know why he came west? The real reason. When she didn't respond, he continued. It wasn't just to start fresh. It was because no respectable Eastern family would associate with him after his betrayal. He stood by his principles, Katherine countered. That's hardly a betrayal. Principles. Hollister laughed softly. Is that what he told you? Did he mention that before the war, he was engaged to my niece? That he abandoned her along with his family obligations? His eyes narrowed. Or that he testified against his own kin to save himself from prosecution? Katherine's heart pounded. I don't believe you. You can verify it easily enough. Ask him about Charlotte Hollister. Ask him about the charges of war profiteering that mysteriously disappeared after his testimony. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Or read it yourself. This is a copy of the court transcript. Katherine didn't take it. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm offering you a choice, Miss Blakely. Hollister's voice hardened. Preston refused to sell me his water rights. But with your land, I could still establish control of the eastern watershed. So this is about business after all, Katherine said, disgusted. It's about giving you an opportunity to secure your future. Hollister placed the envelope on the porch rail. I'm prepared to offer you 3 times what your land is worth, enough to start fresh anywhere you choose, free from debt and hardship. And if I refuse? His smile returned, cold and confident. Then I fear you'll discover, as many have before you, that Preston Mackenzie's affections are as changeable as the prairie wind. When something more advantageous comes along, or when standing by you becomes too costly, he'll abandon you just as he did his family and fiancé. The doubt Hollister intended to plant found fertile soil in Katherine's deepest insecurities. What if Preston's interest in her was temporary? What if, like everything else in her life, this newfound happiness was destined to be taken away? I'll leave you to consider my offer. Hollister returned to his wagon. I'll be in town until Saturday. My man will come for your answer tomorrow. After he departed, Katherine sat on the porch steps, the unopened envelope beside her. She wanted to dismiss Hollister's claims outright, but questions gnawed at her. Preston had never mentioned a fiancé. What else might he be hiding? When Preston arrived later that afternoon, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Katherine, what is it? She handed him the envelope. Hollister was here. He told me about Charlotte. Preston froze, the color draining from his face as he stared at the unopened envelope. You spoke with Hollister? He came to offer me money for my land. Katherine watched him carefully. He also told me things about your past, things you never mentioned. And you believed him? Hurt flashed in Preston's eyes. I don't know what to believe anymore. Katherine stood. Was there a fiancé, Preston? He exhaled slowly. Yes, Charlotte Hollister. We were engaged before the war. And you didn't think to mention this when her uncle threatened us? Katherine's voice rose. When we discussed our pasts. When you kissed me. It ended years ago, Preston said defensively. When I joined the Union Army, her family broke the engagement. She married a Confederate officer 6 months later. And the charges against you? The testimony you gave to save yourself? Anger replaced the hurt in Preston's expression. Is that what he told you? That I testified to save myself? He tore open the envelope and scanned the document inside, his jaw tightening. This is a partial transcript. Convenient of him to omit the pages showing I was the one who voluntarily came forward with evidence, not a defendant turning state's witness. He handed her the papers. I testified because it was right, Katherine. Because I'd seen documents proving that certain businessmen, including Richard Hollister, were selling supplies to both armies at inflated prices, profiting from death, while young men died. Yes, some of those men were connected to my family. Yes, it made me even more of an outcast. But I would do it again. Katherine saw the truth in his eyes, the same unwavering conviction that had drawn her to him. Why is he so determined to drive us apart? Because together, we're stronger. Preston moved closer, taking her hands. Our partnership threatens him, not just our land combined, but what we represent. People working together instead of being intimidated into selling. Katherine wanted to believe him, wanted to dismiss Hollister's warnings as manipulation. But fear, that constant companion of her frontier existence, held her back. How can I know for certain that what we have will last? She whispered. That when winter comes, or drought returns, or some new opportunity arises, you won't decide I'm not worth the trouble? Pain crossed Preston's face. Because I love you, Katherine. Not your land, not what you can offer me, you. His voice broke slightly. I've been alone since I walked away from everything I knew for what I believed in. I never thought I'd find someone who understood that kind of sacrifice until I met you. The raw honesty in his declaration shook her to her core. This was not the calculated charm of a man with ulterior motives, but the vulnerable truth of someone who had known loss as intimately as she had. I need time to think, she said finally. Please. Preston nodded, respecting her request though it clearly pained him. I understand. He turned to go, then stopped. Katherine, whatever you decide about us, don't sell to Hollister. He doesn't just want land. He wants control. Once he has it, no one in the territory will be free to determine their own future. As she watched him ride away, Katherine felt torn between her growing feelings for Preston and the persistent fear that loving him, trusting him, would lead to yet another devastating loss. Hollister had offered certainty, money, security, and escape from struggle. Preston offered something far more precious but infinitely more fragile, a partnership built on shared dreams and mutual respect. By nightfall, she had made her decision, but events were already in motion that would test their bond far more severely than either could have imagined. The fire began shortly after midnight. Katherine awoke to the acrid smell of smoke and the terrified lowing of cattle. Grabbing her shawl, she rushed outside to see flames engulfing the barn, orange tongues reaching hungrily toward the night sky. Jacob, she screamed for Preston's ranch hand who had been sleeping in the loft. There was no answer. Katherine ran to the well, desperately working the pump to fill a bucket. But she knew it was hopeless. The fire had already taken hold, the wooden structure crackling and groaning as the flames consumed it. Her thoughts raced to the cattle, the partnership's future. They were pinned behind the barn, and the fire would soon reach them. Abandoning the futile bucket, she raced toward the pen, coughing as smoke filled her lungs. The heat was intense, singeing her hair as she reached the gate and fumbled with the latch. The cattle were panicking, pushing against the fence, their eyes rolling with terror. Finally, the gate swung open, and the animals surged past her, nearly knocking her down in their desperate flight from the flames. As Katherine turned back toward the house, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Dirk, Hollister's man, stood blocking her path, his face illuminated by the hellish orange glow. Shame about your barn, he said, his voice casual. Frontier's dangerous, like I warned you. You did this, Katherine gasped, anger overcoming fear. Mr. Hollister sent a message. Said to tell you he needs your answer by noon tomorrow. Otherwise, accidents might keep happening. His smile was cruel in the firelight. Next time, it might not be just a barn. Katherine backed away, looking frantically for a weapon. Get off my land. Oh, I'm going. Dirk mounted his horse, which had been hidden in the shadows. Think carefully about Mr. Hollister's offer, Miss Blakely. A woman alone can't fight men like us. Not even with Mackenzie's help. As he rode away, Katherine heard a groan from near the barn. Heart pounding, she ran toward the sound and found Jacob sprawled in the dirt, blood matting his hair. They jumped me, he muttered as she helped him sit up. Hit me from behind when I went to check on the horses. The horses? Katherine gasped, realizing she hadn't seen them flee. Jacob shook his head grimly. They're gone. Stolen or stampeded, I don't know. As the barn collapsed in a shower of sparks, Katherine faced the devastating truth. This was no accident or warning. It was a deliberate attempt to destroy everything she and Preston had built together, to force her to sell from a position of desperation. By dawn, Preston had arrived with his men, their faces grim as they surveyed the smoldering ruins. When Katherine told him about Dirk's visit, his expression darkened dangerously. This ends now, he said, his voice cold with fury. Jacob, Ride to Fort Kearney for the marshal. Tell him what happened here. The marshal's in Hollister's pocket, Katherine reminded him bitterly. Everyone knows it. Then we'll handle this ourselves. Preston turned to her, his eyes reflecting the determination she'd first seen in him months ago. Katherine, I want you to pack a bag and go to my ranch. You'll be safer there with my foreman and the others. I'm not leaving my home, she said firmly. This is exactly what Hollister wants, to frighten me into running. This isn't about pride anymore, Preston argued. It's about your safety. It's about everything we've built together, Katherine countered. If I leave now, I might as well sell to him. I won't be driven off my land, Preston. Not by Hollister, not by fire, not by fear. Their standoff was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Turning, they saw a group of riders coming up the road, not Hollister's men, but neighboring ranchers and farmers, some of whom Katherine recognized from town. Word travels fast, said the leader, an older rancher named Miller. Heard you had trouble, Mackenzie. Preston nodded grimly. Hollister's work. Figured as much. Miller dismounted, others following suit. He's been pushing all of us. Dammed up Taylor Creek last week, so Johnson's place went dry. Threatened Weber's boy when he complained. Why are you here? Katherine asked. Because it's time someone stood against him, Miller replied. We're tired of being bullied, and we figured if anyone would fight back, it'd be you too. As more riders arrived throughout the morning, Katherine watched in amazement as neighbors she barely knew helped clear debris, brought food and supplies, offered livestock to replace what she'd lost. Preston moved among them, organizing, planning, his natural leadership drawing them together into a community united against a common threat. By midday, over 20 ranchers and farmers had gathered at Katherine's homestead. When Dirk and 2 other men rode up at noon, they found not a vulnerable woman alone, but a determined group standing together. Dirk's confidence faltered visibly. Mr. Hollister sent me for your answer, Miss Blakely. Katherine stepped forward, Preston at her side. Tell Mr. Hollister that his tactics have backfired. Not only am I not selling, but neither is anyone else here. She gestured to the assembled neighbors. Tell him we're forming an association to protect our water rights and land claims. Together. He won't take this lightly, Dirk warned, though his bravado had diminished. Neither will we, Preston replied. The days of intimidation are over. Ride back and tell him that. After Dirk departed, the neighbors continued working well into the evening, the shared labor cementing their new alliance. As darkness fell, Katherine found herself standing with Preston at the site where her barn had stood, now a blackened rectangle on the prairie. We'll rebuild it, he said quietly. Together. Katherine turned to him, seeing in his eyes not just the promise of reconstruction, but of a future she had stopped believing possible. I was going to tell you before this happened, she said. I decided not to sell to Hollister. I chose us, our partnership. Preston took her hands. Katherine, when I saw the smoke from my ranch this morning, I realized something. All these months, I've been telling myself that what mattered was building something lasting. The ranch, our partnership, security for the future. His voice grew husky with emotion. But none of it means anything without you. I didn't just fall in love with your strength or your determination. I fell in love with you, your heart, your spirit, everything that makes you who you are. Katherine felt tears filling her eyes. I've been so afraid of losing everything again that I almost missed what was right in front of me. I love you too, Preston. Not because you saved my farm or because you're building something impressive, but because of who you are, a man who stands by his principles no matter the cost. As Preston drew her into his embrace, Katherine knew that whatever came next, whether confrontation with Hollister or the everyday challenges of frontier life, they would face it together. The wall around her heart had finally crumbled completely, replaced by something far stronger, the certainty that some things were worth the risk of loss because without that risk, there could be no genuine love. The kiss they shared beneath the stars was a promise, not just of affection, but of partnership in its truest sense. Hollister's retaliation came swiftly. Within days, the bank called in Katherine's loan, demanding immediate payment in full. The cattle that had escaped the fire were mysteriously scattered, requiring days to round up. The water pump was found sabotaged, the well fouled. Yet with each attack, the neighbors' resolve strengthened. When the banker refused Katherine's payment plan, 3 ranchers withdrew their considerable deposits, threatening the bank's liquidity. When fences were cut, a rotating watch was established. When rumors were spread in town about Preston's past, the community closed ranks around him. Through it all, Katherine and Preston's bond deepened. They worked side by side, rebuilding what had been destroyed, planning their combined future, and strengthening the alliance of landowners that now looked to them for leadership. 2 weeks after the fire, as they returned from town where they had successfully negotiated with a new banker from Omaha, Preston brought his horse alongside Katherine's. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," he said, his usual confidence giving way to nervous energy. "Something I've been thinking about since the night of the fire." Katherine felt her heart quicken at his tone. "What is it?" Preston guided their horses to a stop at the crest of a hill overlooking both their properties. Her homestead to the east, his ranch to the west, the land flowing together without visible boundary under the vast Nebraska sky. "I realize this might seem sudden," he began, "though I don't think anything about our relationship has followed a conventional timeline." Katherine smiled. "No, I suppose not." Preston dismounted and helped her down from her horse, then took both her hands in his. "Katherine, these past months have shown me what truly matters in this life. Not land or cattle or reputation, but having someone to share the journey with, someone who understands both your strengths and your struggles." He dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "I love you. I want to build a life with you, not just merging our ranches, but our hearts and futures as well." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Katherine Blakely, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bloomed within her, bright and certain. This man who had entered her life as a business partner had become essential to her happiness in ways she had never imagined possible. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Preston, I will." As he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's ring, he explained, the one thing he had kept from his past life. Katherine felt the last of her doubts dissolve. The future stretched before them, not without challenges, but full of possibility and shared purpose. What neither of them knew was that Richard Hollister had already set in motion his most desperate play, one that would test their love and resolve more severely than anything that had come before. The letter arrived 1 week before their planned wedding. Katherine was at Preston's ranch, discussing with his foreman where to place the additional cattle pens they would need as their combined herds grew, when a rider from town delivered the envelope. "Special delivery from Omaha," the man explained. "Came on yesterday's train." The expensive stationery bore an ornate Eastern law firm's letterhead. Preston's expression grew increasingly troubled as he read. "What is it?" Katherine asked, concern rising. Preston handed her the letter, his face pale. "Charlotte Hollister, my former fiancée, is filing suit against me. She claims we had a common-law marriage before I left Virginia, and that she's entitled to half my property as my legal wife." Katherine scanned the document, her stomach sinking. "This is ridiculous. You said she married someone else during the war." "She did. An officer named James Whitfield." Preston ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "He died at Petersburg in '65. According to this, she's claiming their marriage was invalid because she was already married to me in the eyes of Virginia law. Can she do that? After all these years?" "I don't know." Preston's voice was hollow. "The letter says I must appear in federal court in Omaha next month to contest the claim, or the judgment will be awarded by default." The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. 1 week before their wedding, a claim emerges that could not only cost Preston his ranch, but brand him a bigamist if he married Katherine while the suit was pending. "This is Hollister's work," Katherine said, anger rising. "When he couldn't beat us directly, he found another way to attack." Preston nodded grimly, using his niece as the weapon. "I wouldn't put it past him." The foreman, who had been listening, cleared his throat. "What are you going to do, boss?" "Fight it, of course." Preston's determination returned. "I'll ride to Omaha tomorrow, find a lawyer. This claim is baseless. Charlotte and I never lived as husband and wife, never presented ourselves as married." He turned to Katherine, taking her hands. "But our wedding may need to be postponed until this is resolved. I won't have anyone questioning the legitimacy of our marriage or your position as my wife." Though she understood the necessity, disappointment settled in Katherine's chest. Once again, happiness seemed to be slipping from her grasp just as she reached for it. "How long will it take?" she asked. "I don't know." Courts moved slowly. Preston's eyes held hers. "Katherine, If you want to reconsider, don't you dare finish that sentence, Preston Mackenzie, she interrupted fiercely. I didn't agree to marry you only when it was convenient or easy. I agreed to face life together. All of it, including this. Relief washed over his features. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she teased, attempting to lighten the moment. But you're stuck with me anyway. As Preston prepared for his journey to Omaha the next day, Katherine returned to her homestead, determined not to let this latest setback defeat her. They had overcome fire, threats, and sabotage. They would overcome this too. What she didn't expect was the visitor waiting on her porch when she arrived home. A woman perhaps 10 years older than herself, elegantly dressed despite the dust of travel, with features that spoke of breeding and privilege. Miss Blakely, the woman asked, rising gracefully. I'm Charlotte Whitfield, formerly Hollister. Katherine stiffened. I know who you are. If you've come to gloat about your lawsuit, I've come to stop it, Charlotte interrupted, surprising Katherine into silence. May we speak privately? What I have to tell you concerns both our futures. Inside the cabin, Charlotte declined refreshment, her manner direct. My uncle has manipulated this situation against my wishes. I never agreed to file suit against Preston. Then why is there a lawyer's letter? Because my uncle forged my signature and arranged everything through his attorneys. Charlotte's expression was grim. He told me what he'd done only yesterday, presenting it as a favor to me. He claimed it would restore my rightful property. And it's not what you want. Katherine studied the woman cautiously. No, my life with Preston ended years ago, by mutual choice. Charlotte's eyes reflected old sorrow. We loved each other once, but the war forced impossible choices on us both. I respected his conviction, even when it broke my heart. She reached into her reticule and withdrew a packet of letters. These are Preston's letters to me during the early war years, before I married James. They clearly show we considered our engagement broken. I've also brought my marriage certificate to James Whitfield and documentation of our life together. Katherine stared at the papers. Why are you giving me these? Because they prove the lawsuit is fraudulent. Charlotte met her gaze directly. And because I won't allow my uncle to use me as a weapon against Preston or against you. Why would you help us? Katherine asked, still suspicious. You don't know me, but I know Preston. He's a man of principle, rare in any time, but especially during war. Charlotte's voice softened. And I know what it's like to find love on the frontier. After James died, I came west with nothing. I met my current husband, a rancher in Wyoming Territory, while working as a schoolteacher. We've built a good life together. She smiled slightly. When I heard Preston had finally found someone he wanted to build a life with, I was genuinely happy for him. I won't let my uncle destroy that happiness for his financial gain. Katherine felt the tension drain from her shoulders. Thank you. But won't this put you at odds with your uncle? It already has. Charlotte stood, preparing to leave. Uncle Richard has controlled our family for too long, using money and manipulation. It's time someone stood against him, and I believe you and Preston are the ones to do it. After Charlotte departed, Katherine immediately rode to Preston's ranch, the precious papers secured in her saddlebag. The relief on his face when she explained was palpable. Charlotte always did have more courage than anyone gave her credit for, he said, examining the letters. These will end Hollister's case before it begins. She's risking her uncle's wrath, Katherine noted. She must truly wish us well. Preston nodded, thoughtful. Or she sees in us the chance to finally break Hollister's control over everyone in his orbit. He pulled Katherine into his arms. Either way, it means our wedding can proceed as planned. As they stood together, the future once again bright with promise, Katherine realized how much she had changed from the desperate, isolated woman Preston had found staring hopelessly at failing crops. She had learned not only to trust him, but to trust herself, to believe that happiness was possible even in the harsh realities of frontier life, that love could flourish even in the most unlikely circumstances. What remained was to face Hollister himself, to end his threats once and for all. Neither of them suspected just how desperate their adversary would become when cornered, or what it would cost them to secure their future together. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the October prairie painted in russet and gold. Katherine stood in her bedroom, looking at her reflection in the small mirror as her neighbor, Mrs. Miller, fastened the buttons of her wedding dress, a confection of ivory silk that had arrived from Omaha just 2 days before Preston's gift. You look beautiful, dear, Mrs. Miller said, adjusting the simple veil. Like something from a painting. Katherine hardly recognized herself. The woman in the mirror seemed transformed, not just by the elegant dress or the carefully arranged hair, but by the quiet confidence in her eyes, the certainty that had replaced doubt. It's almost time, Mrs. Miller said, glancing out the window where neighbors and friends had gathered in the yard. A simple arbor constructed of ranch wood stood ready, decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons. Preston waited there, handsome in a new black suit, speaking with the minister who had ridden out from Fort Kearny. As Katherine prepared to join them, a commotion arose outside, the sound of approaching horses at speed. Her heart sank. Surely Hollister wouldn't disrupt their wedding day? Moving to the window, she saw Richard Hollister himself dismounting, flanked by Dirk and 3 other men. Preston stepped forward to meet them, his posture tense but controlled. Katherine hurried outside, ignoring Mrs. Miller's protest about the groom seeing the bride before the ceremony. Some moments demanded standing together. "You're not welcome here, Hollister," Preston was saying as she approached. The gathered wedding guests had formed a protective semicircle behind him. "I've come to stop this farce," Hollister announced, his voice carrying. "This marriage cannot proceed legally. My niece's claim has been withdrawn," Katherine interjected, coming to stand beside Preston. "As you well know, since Charlotte herself delivered the proof of your fraud to us." Hollister's face darkened with fury. "That ungrateful—" "Careful," Preston warned. "That's your niece you're speaking of. A woman of more integrity than you've shown." "You think you've won," Hollister snarled. "But I still control the water rights to half this county. I can still make it impossible for your little alliance to survive." "No, Richard, you can't." The new voice came from behind them. Charlotte herself approached, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man in a marshal's uniform. Not the local marshal, but a federal one. "Charlotte," Hollister spat, "have you come to witness your betrayal's outcome?" "I've come to see justice done," she replied calmly. "Marshal Evans is here with a federal warrant for your arrest on charges of mail fraud, extortion, and interference with federal land grants." The marshal stepped forward. "Richard Hollister, I have documentation of systematic fraud in your land dealings across 3 territories. Your niece has provided evidence of your forging her signature on legal documents, and we have sworn statements from multiple landowners regarding threats and intimidation." Hollister's face went ashen as the marshal continued. "You're to come with me to Omaha to face federal charges. Your assets will be frozen pending investigation." "This is absurd," Hollister blustered, though his confidence had visibly crumbled. "You have no authority. I have every authority." The marshal cut him off. "And if you resist, I'll add that to the charges." As the marshal took Hollister into custody, Dirk and the other men quickly distanced themselves, clearly unwilling to face federal charges for their employer's schemes. Charlotte approached Katherine and Preston. "I'm sorry for the interruption. I tried to time this for after your ceremony, but the marshal insisted on immediate action once we reached the territory." "Don't apologize," Katherine said warmly. "You've given us the greatest wedding gift possible, peace." Preston extended his hand to his former fiancée. "Thank you, Charlotte, for everything." "Be happy, Preston," she replied simply. "Both of you. That's all the thanks I need." As Charlotte departed with the marshal and his prisoner, the wedding guests buzzed with excitement at the dramatic turn of events. Preston turned to Katherine, his eyes filled with wonder. "It seems the last obstacle has been removed," he said. "Shall we continue with making you my wife, Miss Blakely? Unless all this excitement has changed your mind." Katherine laughed, joy bubbling up within her. "Preston Mackenzie, not even a federal arrest could keep me from marrying you today." The ceremony that followed was simple but profound. Under the October sky, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends and allies, they exchanged vows that meant more for the trials they had already weathered together. "I, Preston, take you, Katherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death parts us." As Katherine repeated the same words, she remembered their first meeting, how alone she had felt, how certain that no man would ever truly see her worth beyond her failing farm. How wrong she had been. "With this ring, I thee wed," Preston said, sliding a simple gold band alongside her engagement ring. His eyes held hers with such tenderness that her heart seemed to expand in her chest. "You may kiss the bride," the minister proclaimed. As Preston's lips met hers, sealing their union, Katherine heard the cheers of their neighbors and friends. But more importantly, she felt the rightness of this moment, of choosing love over fear, partnership over isolation, hope over despair. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing in the yard of what was now their shared homestead. As the sun began to set, painting the prairie in a glory of orange and gold, Preston led Katherine away from the festivities to a quiet spot where they could watch the magnificent display. "Happy, Mrs. Mackenzie?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I ever believed possible," she answered honestly. "And you?" "I came west to build something lasting," Preston said, gazing at the sunset before turning to her. "I never imagined it would be this, a partnership, a community, a love stronger than all the forces aligned against it." Katherine leaned into his embrace, watching the sun sink below the horizon in a final blaze of glory. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when I was at my lowest point, I truly believed no man would ever love me, that I was destined to lose this land and everything I cared about." Preston turned her to face him, framing her face gently with his hands. "You're more beautiful than sunset," the cowboy said when she claimed no man would love her. "And not just in appearance, Katherine, though you take my breath away. Your spirit, your courage, your determination, everything about you outshines even this glorious sky." As darkness settled over the prairie, the first stars appearing overhead, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home, not just in the land they would work together, but in the heart of the man who had seen her worth when she had forgotten it herself. The frontier that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving had become the backdrop for a love story neither of them had expected, but both had desperately needed. A partnership forged in adversity, tempered by challenge, and ultimately triumphant in its simple truth, that even in the wildest West, love could not only survive but flourish, transforming everything it touched. As they walked back to join their friends, hand in hand beneath the vast Nebraska sky, Katherine and Preston Mackenzie stepped into their future together, not naive about the challenges that lay ahead, but confident in their ability to face them side by side. Their separate journeys now merged into a single path forward.